"You're funding Adam's company again." My voice trembled as I stared across the polished dining table at my father, the proposal I'd spent weeks crafting sitting untouched between us. "Dad, his last 2 ventures burned through tens of thousands of your money. I'm pitching you an actual plan, something solid, and you won't even look at it." My father, Omar Hassan, didn't so much as blink. He folded his napkin with deliberate care, leaned back in his chair, and acted as though I hadn't just laid my heart bare. "Leah, I admire your enthusiasm, but business is a man's responsibility. Adam needs this to establish himself. You have a stable job. You should focus on that." The familiar sting of those words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. They echoed in the quiet room, lingering like a chill. Adam, my younger brother, barely glanced up from his phone, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. He didn't even bother to hide his boredom. He'd heard this before, after all. The same refrain, always meant for me, never for him. "My name is Leah Hassan. I'm 30 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've dreamed of starting my own company. I was the child who hoarded notebooks full of business ideas, the teenager who stayed up researching market gaps, the adult who juggled spreadsheets and strategy plans for fun. Ambition wasn't just something I felt. It was something that lived in my bones. This dream wasn't a passing fancy. It was the truest part of me. Growing up, I watched my father build his business from scratch, brick by brick. A logistics company that carried our family through lean years and gave us a sense of security. I admired his grit, his stubborn refusal to give up, the pride he took in every small victory. I wanted to be like him, to build something lasting, something with my own hands. But even as a child, I sensed the invisible lines he'd drawn. Those lines marked Adam as the heir, the chosen one, while I was gently, but firmly, steered away from the family legacy. Adam's attempts at entrepreneurship had been little more than expensive experiments. A failed e-commerce site, a buggy app, a marketing agency that fizzled before it even got started. Each time my father opened his checkbook without hesitation. "Adam just needs to find his footing," he'd say, as if failure itself was a rite of passage reserved for sons. "It's all part of the process." But for me there was no patience, no cushion for mistakes. My ideas were dismissed as impractical, or not that important. "You're better off staying in your job," he'd tell me. "It's secure and you're good at it." He wasn't wrong about my job. I was good at it. I'd worked my way up in finance, surviving in a male-dominated field, learning to speak up, to analyze, to lead. I managed budgets, dissected markets, advised others on how to grow. But it wasn't enough. There was a fire inside me that wouldn't be quieted by paychecks or promotions. I wanted something of my own, something I could nurture, shape, and watch grow with my own effort. Now, sitting in my father's house, the walls covered in artifacts from his journey, I finally accepted a truth I'd always tried to deny. He would never see me as an entrepreneur. Not the way he saw Adam. His love was there, but his faith in me was conditional, limited by beliefs he didn't even question. "Dad, this is a mistake," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You're giving Adam another shot at something he's not ready for. I've spent months on this plan. Slow risk, scalable. You could see returns within a year. I've done the research. I'm prepared." He shook his head, the decision final and immovable. "Leah, it's not about risk. It's about opportunity. Adam needs this. And I don't." The words burst out before I could stop them, my composure cracking. "Why does he get chance after chance, and I get nothing? Is it because I'm not good enough, or just not enough?" My father's face hardened. "This discussion is over." For a moment I just sat there, numb, my breath shallow. The room seemed to shrink around me, the air thick with disappointment. Then, quietly, I pushed my chair back and walked out, the proposal still untouched on the table. That night, in my cramped apartment, I stared at the business plan that had consumed so many of my evenings. It wasn't just a stack of spreadsheets and bullet points. It was a piece of myself, a vision I'd shaped from the ground up. I developed a boutique consultancy concept, specializing in financial planning and strategic advice for small businesses that couldn't afford big firms. I'd found a niche the market was ignoring. I'd projected modest, realistic growth, mapped out a lean marketing plan, even set aside a sliver of my savings for a website and basic branding. And my father hadn't even bothered to read it. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But beneath the hurt, a stubborn resolve took root. If he wouldn't back me, I'd back myself. I didn't have his wealth or his connections, but I had my skills, my determination, and the little money I'd managed to set aside. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover the basics for a few months. But it was a start. I wouldn't let his doubts become my limits. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I picked up the phone and called Yasmin, my best friend and the only person who'd ever truly understood how much this meant to me. "I'm going to do it," I said, my voice shaking but my mind made up. "I'm starting the business. No more waiting for him to believe in me." "Yes." Yasmin's cheer was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She'd always been my biggest supporter, the one who saw the fire in me even when I doubted myself. "I'm so proud of you, Leah. You're going to crush this." "I know it." I laughed, but it was thin, tentative. "I don't know about crushing it. I'm terrified. I barely have enough savings to get started. What if I fail?" "He's not right about you," Yasmin said, her voice unwavering. "He's stuck in the past, Leah. This isn't about proving him wrong. It's about proving yourself right. You have everything it takes. You just need to give yourself permission." Her words lingered with me all day, echoing louder than my father's doubts. Maybe I didn't need his approval. Maybe what I really needed was my own. Starting the business was even harder than I'd imagined, and I already knew it would be a challenge. Most of my savings vanished almost immediately. Business registration fees, a simple but professional-looking website, and a laptop that was barely better than my old one but could finally run the software I needed. My tiny dining table became my office, cluttered with notebooks, receipts, and coffee mugs. I squeezed the work into every spare minute outside my demanding day job, sacrificing weekends and evenings, driven by the urgency to prove, to myself if no one else, that I could do this. My first challenge was finding clients. I had no reputation, no portfolio, and no family connections to get my foot in the door. Instead, I became relentless. I scoured online forums, cold emailed dozens of small businesses, and joined every local entrepreneur group I could find. I rewrote my pitch 100 times, learning to anticipate objections and highlight what made my services unique. Each rejection stung, but I kept going, driven by a stubborn hope that somewhere out there was someone willing to take a chance on me. Sometimes late at night, I'd remember sitting across from my father. His face closed off, his mind made up. Those memories hurt, but they also fueled me. If I succeeded, it would be because I'd built something with my own hands. No shortcuts, no family money, just grit and belief. I realized I wasn't just fighting for a business. I was fighting for the right to define myself. As the days turned to weeks, I started to see small signs of progress. A reply to an email, a coffee meeting that turned into a tentative contract, a referral from someone who liked my approach. Each win, no matter how small, felt monumental. For the first time, I wasn't just dreaming about what I could do. I was doing it. And with every step, I grew less interested in proving my father wrong. Instead, I became more focused on proving myself right. My worth didn't depend on his approval or anyone else's. It came from the courage to try, to risk, to build something new even in the face of doubt. In the end, my father's rejection wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. I went door to door in the neighborhood shopping districts, clutching stacks of flyers I'd designed late at night on my battered laptop. My hand ached from all the folding, and my voice grew hoarse after hours of introducing myself to wary business owners and their distracted customers. Most people accepted a flyer with a polite nod, but I could see their eyes glaze over even before I launched into my pitch. "We'll think about it," they'd tell me, or, "maybe next quarter when things pick up." Their words were gentle enough, but the message was clear. Not interested. I tried to remind myself that rejection was part of the process, But there were days when the disappointment sank deep, making me question whether I was in over my head. At night, lying awake in the silence of my apartment, I'd hear my father's voice echo in my mind. Focus on your stable job. Some nights, his words almost felt like a prophecy I was trying, and failing, to outrun. Leah, you need to stop beating yourself up, Yasmin told me one evening as we huddled around my small kitchen table, papers and laptops scattered between empty tea mugs. We were brainstorming new ways to get the word out about my services, tossing around ideas for social media campaigns and local partnerships. This is just how it goes at the start. You're planting seeds. They'll grow. You just need to give it time. Yasmin had become more than a friend. She was my relentless cheerleader and my unofficial business partner. She worked as a graphic designer by day, but the moment I'd confided my idea to her, she'd thrown herself into my venture with all the energy and optimism I sometimes lacked. She designed a logo that finally made my business feel real, gave my website a much-needed facelift, and whipped up sleek, professional brochures that made my offering look every bit as legitimate as the bigger firms. Suddenly, with her touch, my shoestring operation looked like something people could trust. I don't know what I'd do without you, I said, watching her expertly tweak a color palette on her tablet. It was true. I felt like I was learning to fly, and she was my co-pilot, guiding me through turbulence. You'd figure it out, she replied, flashing me a reassuring smile. But lucky for you, you don't have to. With Yasmin's help, I shifted my strategy. Instead of trying to reach everyone and ending up with nothing, I narrowed my focus to the kinds of local businesses that needed help most. Independent boutiques, cozy cafes, and the small family-run shops fighting to keep their doors open as bigger competitors moved in. I started offering free consultations, figuring if I could just get my foot in the door I could prove my worth. It meant longer hours and sometimes working for little to no pay. But slowly, the effort started to bear fruit. One client led to another. A grateful bakery owner told her friend at the flower shop about me. And soon, I had a small but steady stream of work. Each new project felt like a tiny victory. Still, my family's skepticism was a constant shadow. My father, who had barely spoken to me since I stormed out of that tense family dinner, made his disapproval clear in his silence. My mother called occasionally, her voice gentle but edged with concern, always fishing for updates. "How's your little project going?" she'd ask, her tone careful, as if afraid to poke too hard at a sore spot. "It's not a project, Mama," I'd reply, forcing a smile she couldn't see but hoping she could hear my conviction. "It's a business. And it's going well." Good, she'd say, quickly moving on. "You know your father is very busy with Adam's company right now. Maybe you should ask Adam for advice." The mention of my brother twisted my stomach into knots. Adam's startup, generously funded by my father, was floundering. Everyone in the industry seemed to know it except my family. Rumors circulated among my old colleagues. Adam was struggling to keep his investors happy, burning through cash with little to show for it. Still, my father kept pouring money into his venture, convinced that with just a bit more time, Adam would triumph. One afternoon, I spotted Adam in a coffee shop near my apartment. He was hunched over his laptop, his brow furrowed in frustration, typing with the frantic energy of someone desperate to keep things together. "Hey!" I greeted him, cautious. He looked up, surprised to see me. "Leah, what are you doing here?" "I live around the corner," I said, nodding toward the window. "How's the company?" He hesitated, glancing back at his screen. "It's fine. Just a lot of moving parts, you know." I didn't push. I could see the anxiety in his eyes, the exhaustion in the way his shoulders sagged. As I left, a wave of complicated sympathy washed over me. Adam was drowning, and for the first time I didn't just envy him, I pitied him. Still, I had my own battles to fight. At home, I became relentless about refining my approach. I started tracking every detail. Which pitches landed, which fell flat, what kind of businesses responded, and which ones ignored me entirely. I kept a color-coded spreadsheet of my expenses and income, determined not to let even a single dollar slip through the cracks. I learned to streamline my processes, cutting out unnecessary steps and setting goals that felt ambitious but achievable. Every tiny win felt monumental. The first time a client recommended me to someone else, the first month I made enough to pay my rent without dipping into my savings. Each of those moments was a small rebellion against my father's doubts and my own fears. Yasmin was there for every milestone. The night I landed a contract with a local bakery chain to handle their finances and payroll, we celebrated with cheap pizza and sodas in my cramped living room. "This is it, Leah," she said, grinning as she clinked her can against mine. "This is your breakthrough." "It's a start," I replied, my chest swelling with pride and something I hadn't felt in months, hope. For the first time, my business felt less like a gamble and more like a future I was building, one brick at a time. But progress wasn't linear. There were setbacks that stung. A promising client who disappeared after weeks of negotiations, another who dropped my services when they hired an in-house team. Every rejection threatened to knock me off balance, but I refused to let it derail me. I leaned on Yasmin, venting my frustrations and gathering my resolve. "I'm not doing this just to prove my father wrong," I confessed one night as we mapped out our next moves. "At least, not entirely. I'm doing this because I believe in it. I believe in me even if they don't." Yasmin smiled, her eyes shining with conviction. "And that," she said, tapping her pen against the table for emphasis, "is exactly why you're going to succeed." The real turning point came about 6 months in. The bakery chain was so pleased with my work that they started recommending me to their suppliers. Suddenly, my inbox overflowed with inquiries from florists, caterers, and other small businesses who'd heard about the accountant who actually cared. Within weeks, I was managing finances and payroll for 5 local businesses, each with their own quirks and challenges. For the first time, I had more work than I could handle alone. I hired Yasmin part-time to help with branding and communications, grateful to have her by my side in an official capacity. Watching my business grow was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. With the new contracts, I could finally afford to move my office out of my cramped dining room and into a shared co-working space downtown. The space itself was nothing fancy, just a desk by the window and access to a coffee pot, but it was mine. A concrete sign of how far I'd come. Every morning, as I unlocked the front door and settled in at my desk, I felt a surge of pride and possibility. I was building something lasting, something I could call my own. And for the first time, I truly believed I could make it, no matter what anyone else thought. I walked into that room, sunlight spilling in broad golden streaks through the tall windows, catching dust motes in midair and lighting up every corner. The atmosphere thrummed with energy. Voices mingling, a printer churning somewhere, the sharp click of keyboards, all of it underscored by a kind of restless optimism. I paused in the doorway, letting it all wash over me. This was mine. Not just the furniture or the logo on the wall, but the pulse, the drive, the sense that we were building something real. For a moment I let myself feel that electric pride. I did this. I made this possible, from nothing but an idea and a stubborn refusal to give up. But even as I tried to hold on to that feeling, my mind kept snagging on the news filtering in from Adam's side of the world. A world that had always seemed shinier, more promising, at least to our parents. The rumors had started as anxious whispers, but lately they were everywhere. Missed deadlines, staff skipping meetings, investors asking harder questions and getting fewer answers. It was as if Adam's startup, once the family's golden child, was beginning to come apart at the seams. My mom, always quick to worry, started calling more often, the concern in her voice unmistakable. She never quite said what she meant, but every conversation circled back to Adam. How stressed he was, how your father was doing everything he could, how maybe it still wasn't enough. When I hung up the phone, their tension lingered, a weight pressing at the edges of my own hard-won confidence. Then, almost overnight, it all collapsed. I was mid-conversation with a new client, pitching our next steps, when my phone buzzed with frantic messages from a friend in the industry. Had I heard? Adam's company was shutting down. Investors had pulled out, the whole project unraveling in public view. The news felt like a shockwave, even though I'd seen the warning signs. "Your dad must be devastated," my friend said, and I imagined the fallout at home, a sense of failure hanging over everything. By the time I got home, the news had already reached my parents. Mom called, her voice trembling, panic and defeat bleeding through each word. "Leah, can you come for dinner tonight? Your father wants to talk." I almost said no, bracing myself for the storm, but something in me wanted to face them, to be seen not as the backup plan, but as someone who'd quietly become a success in her own right. Maybe, finally, my father would really see me. When I walked in that evening, the air felt heavy, the usual comfort of home replaced by a brittle silence. Dad sat at the head of the table, his hands folded, looking older, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Mom busied herself with the plates, but no one was interested in eating. Adam sat hunched over his phone, eyes glazed, lost in thoughts I couldn't guess. "Leah," my father began as I took my seat, his voice unusually gentle. "We need to talk." I steeled myself for a lecture on family, or a desperate request to help Adam pick up the pieces. But he surprised me. "I've been hearing about your business," he said, choosing his words with care. "You've built something impressive." For a moment I couldn't speak. I'd spent years chasing those words, replaying imaginary conversations where he finally acknowledged me. Now that it was happening, it felt almost unreal. "Thank you," I managed, trying to sound composed. "It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it." He nodded, glancing at Adam, who still hadn't looked up. Adam's company didn't work out. I thought I was helping him by giving him everything he needed, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe I wasn't helping either of you. I stared at him, struggling to process the shift. "What do you mean?" asked wary. He met my eyes, remorse flickering in his. "I underestimated you, Layla. I thought Adam needed my support more than you did. I was wrong. You've shown me how wrong I was." Adam finally looked up, his expression sour. "Dad, this isn't about her," he snapped. "My company didn't fail because of me. The investors." "Enough, Adam," my father cut in, his voice unexpectedly sharp. "You're not a failure, but you weren't ready. Layla was." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I watched Adam wrestle with them, saw the anger and shame flicker across his face. Part of me wanted to revel in the vindication, but mostly I felt empathy. I knew too well what it meant to be overlooked, to have to fight for every scrap of recognition. The only difference was, I'd channeled that into building something of my own, while Adam had always assumed the path would be cleared for him. "Layla," Dad said, his tone softening. "I'm proud of you. I should have told you sooner. You've shown me what it means to fight for what you believe in. I see that now. For so long I'd imagined this moment, Dad finally seeing me, acknowledging everything I'd accomplished on my own. I thought it would feel triumphant, like winning some secret contest. But it was quieter than that, almost gentle. What I felt wasn't victory, but a kind of peace I hadn't known I was missing. "Thank you, Dad," I said, steady. "I didn't do this to prove you wrong. I did it because I knew I could. I hope you can see that now." He nodded, regret and pride mingling in his expression. "Do, Layla. Really do." That night, as I left my parents' house, I felt a strange lightness. The years of doubt and comparison hadn't vanished, but they'd lost their power. For the first time, I realized I didn't need my father's approval to validate my success. I'd already proven it to myself in every late night, every hard-won client, every small victory along the way. The weeks after that dinner were quieter than I expected. My father never mentioned Adam's failed startup again, but something had shifted between them. Dad stopped trying to fix things for Adam, and Adam, stripped of his safety net, seemed to be reassessing everything. The disappointment lingered, but I could see a flicker of humility in my brother that hadn't been there before. Then one evening my phone rang. Adam, his voice softer, less certain than I remembered. "Leah, how do you manage your client relationships? What keeps them loyal, keeps them coming back to you instead of jumping to someone else?" I almost laughed. I never imagined Adam would be the one asking me for advice. "Are you asking me for help?" Tease. "Yeah," he admitted, sheepish. "I mean, you're obviously doing something right. I don't want to repeat my mistakes." For a moment, I just let myself enjoy the reversal. The brother I'd always been compared to, now turning to me for guidance. But I could hear the vulnerability underneath, the need for reassurance I'd once felt so keenly. It's about trust, I told him. Anyone can sell a product, but clients need to believe you'll deliver, that you care about their results as much as your own. If they feel like they matter to you, they'll stick with you, even when things get tough. Adam was quiet, absorbing this. That makes sense, he finally said. Thanks, Leah. He hung up, but his humility lingered with me. Maybe this was the start of something new, not just for Adam but for both of us. For the first time, our relationship wasn't about rivalry or comparison, but about learning from each other, about seeing each other clearly, separate from the roles our family had assigned us. In the end, I realized recognition from others was nice, but the truest validation came from within. And I'd already earned that, long before anyone else noticed. It took me by surprise. My dad's shift in attitude wasn't something I'd ever really expected. For so long he'd brushed off my business as a project, something temporary, a distraction before I settled on a more conventional path. But then, almost overnight, he changed. He started digging deeper, asking about my clients, my approach, my vision for the future. He wanted to know what drove me, what challenges I anticipated. At one point, he even offered to connect me with some of his old business associates. I declined as tactfully as I could. I needed to draw a line to keep family separate from work, at least for now. Despite that, his support landed with more impact than I'd imagined. It was as if I'd been holding my breath for years, waiting for just this kind of acknowledgement. The day he came to my office for the first time is one I'll never forget. My workspace was modest. A couple of rented desks in a shared co-working suite, a far cry from the sleek corporate headquarters that had been his domain. But he didn't seem to notice the difference in scale. He took his time, really absorbing the energy of the place, noticing the details I'd fussed over. The wall of sticky notes, the framed quote above my desk, the faint smell of burnt coffee from the shared kitchen. Then he turned to me and said, "You've built something remarkable here. I'm proud of you, Layla." The words washed over me, warm and unexpected, unlocking a part of me I thought I'd sealed off. I managed a genuine smile, feeling a kind of gratitude and love that took me by surprise. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." In that moment, I realized how much I'd craved his respect. Not just as my father, but as someone who understood what it took to build something from scratch. But the most profound change wasn't just in him. It was in me. For so long, I'd measured my worth against his standards, always wondering if I'd ever be enough in his eyes. But suddenly I felt something shift inside. I understood that my sense of accomplishment, my growing confidence, didn't come from his validation or anyone else's approval. It came from the grit I'd shown, the late nights and early mornings, the risks I'd taken and the failures I'd learned from. I finally recognized that running a business wasn't about status or even financial success. It was about resilience, creativity, and the ability to believe in myself when there were no guarantees. I'd built something real, something sustainable, and I'd done it on my own terms. There was one evening in particular. After everyone else had packed up and left, the cleaning crew clattering in the hallway, that I sat by the window and looked out over the city. The skyline glittered, a comforting reminder of how many stories played out behind those lights. I let myself think, really think about the road I'd traveled. My family was evolving, softening in ways I hadn't expected. My father and brother were learning to see me not as the kid sister or the daughter carving out her own side path, but as someone who stood as their equal, who'd earned her place at the table. Even more importantly, I was starting to see myself that way. There were still hurdles to clear, new clients to pitch, decisions that would keep me up at night. But for the first time, I genuinely felt independent. I was steering my own ship, and the sense of freedom was exhilarating. 6 months later, the company had grown beyond anything I'd pictured when I first started out, nervously sending invoices from my kitchen table. Now it was a tight-knit consultancy with 2 part-time employees, and after much deliberation, I brought on a creative director to help us craft sharper, more engaging campaigns for our clients. We weren't just balancing books or fixing spreadsheets. We were helping small businesses find their footing, guiding them toward sustainability and growth. Each new client brought a fresh puzzle to solve, and I found myself thriving on the challenge. One of the moments I cherish most happened when a respected regional business magazine featured me in their list of up-and-coming entrepreneurs. They called my firm a shining example of grassroots success, a phrase I read over and over, scarcely believing it described my journey. When the article was published, I mailed a copy to my parents. My mother was the first to call, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "Leah, this is incredible. Your father's already framed it for his office." I tried to picture my dad, the man who once gently dismissed my ambitions, proudly displaying an article about my work for his colleagues to see. 4 years I'd longed for this, for him to see me not just as his daughter, but as someone who'd earned his respect. Now I realized that the respect meant so much more because I'd earned it through my own determination and hard work, not just because he finally offered it. Even family dinners changed. The conversations were different now. Richer, more meaningful. My dad asked about my day-to-day operations, listened intently to stories about difficult clients or creative breakthroughs. Adam, my younger brother, had found his own path, landing a job at a marketing firm where his quirky ideas were finally appreciated. The rivalry that had once simmered between us faded, replaced by an easy camaraderie and mutual respect. One night, as we cleared plates and chatted about work and life, Adam turned to me with a grin. "You're doing something amazing, Leah. I'm proud of you." The sincerity in his words took me by surprise, and I laughed, but it meant more than I could say. "Thanks, Adam. That really means something." He winked and added, "But don't think I won't steal some of your ideas for my next campaign." I shot back, "Only if you pay me consulting fees," and the room filled with laughter. For the first time I felt like we were all rooting for each other, not competing for approval or attention. But the biggest transformation by far was the change within myself. Building this business taught me more than any class or mentor ever could. I learned what it meant to persevere through setbacks, to trust my instincts even when the path ahead was unclear. I stopped apologizing for my ambitions or feeling the need to justify my place at the table. I became my own advocate, my own source of motivation. I realized that success isn't about who gets the first chance or the loudest applause. It's about who refuses to give up, who adapts and grows with every challenge. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the office windows, I found myself standing at the glass, looking down at the city's constant movement. My father's words echoed in my mind, not the old dismissive ones, but the proud, affirming words I'd waited so long to hear. "You've built something remarkable." 4 years, I'd shaped my choices around the pursuit of his approval. But now I knew where my value came from. It wasn't something anyone could bestow or take away. It was mine, forged through every late night, every leap of faith. That evening, as I locked up the office and headed home, a sense of peace settled over me. My business was thriving, my family was stronger, and for the first time, my life felt undeniably my own. The journey had been anything but smooth. There were times of doubt, of exhaustion, of wondering if I'd made a mistake. But every hardship, every lesson, had shaped me into the leader, the woman I was becoming. I understood now that this wasn't just the closing of a chapter, but the beginning of a new story, one I could write in my own words, on my own terms. The future stretched out before me, full of possibility, and I found myself eager, almost impatient, to discover where this path would lead. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving or proving myself to others. I was truly living, grounded in the knowledge that I could build and rebuild, no matter what challenges came my way. And that, more than anything, made me excited for what was still to come.